the chair of the Community Relations Committee of the Jewish Federation and Jewish Foundation of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Welcome to our weekly lunch and learn series. Today, we're pleased to have Dr. Chris Williamson with us. Dr. Williamson is the pastor of Strong Tower Bible Church and the co-founder of the Fuller Story Initiative. And also, he is a member of the task force in Williamson County that has been tasked with trying to figure out if Williamson County needs a new seal, and if so, what that should look like. Welcome, Dr. Williamson. Could you start off with just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up here and also on that task force?
Well, thank you for inviting me this morning to join with you and your audience. It is indeed a privilege to share a little bit about who I am and what I have been tasked to participate in. Briefly, I came to the state of Tennessee back in 1992. I was in the music business, as so many people who come to Nashville. I was a gospel rap artist, and our record company was in Nashville. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, went to school in Virginia where I met my wife. We got married, then moved here to pursue that dream of music. But the Lord had other ideas, and we lost our record contract not soon after we arrived. And I started working with a church in Franklin. I didn't know anything about Franklin or Williamson County. We were living in Nashville. I just knew that's where all the rich people lived, in Williamson County in Franklin. And so I interviewed with a church in Franklin and got hired by them. And after 2.5 years of being on staff with them, I started a church. And the church that I started was multiracial from the beginning. And that was 25 years ago that we started in the Franklin YMCA. And we've had several location changes over the years. And for the past 8 years or so, we've been in the Brentwood, Nashville area on Granny White Pike. And so again, honored to pastor a diverse group of people, Black, white, conservative, progressive, wealthy, low income, and everything and everyone in between. And you can imagine it has its challenges at times, especially in times like these that our nation finds itself in terms of politics and voting for the next president of the United States. And so at the core of my ministry has always been some form of racial reconciliation, racial justice. And so therefore, when it came to the Fuller story, really what happened in Charlottesville, and even if we were to back up from that and go to what happened in Charleston, South Carolina, when Dylann Roof killed the 9 African-American church members in Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston. And then following that, you have the events of Charlottesville, where Heather Heyer, a young white lady, was run over by an Antifa, a racist person. And then that's when the president said there's fine people on both sides. And so we assembled on our square in Franklin because we know that at the heart of the situation with Dylann Roof was the Confederate flag and that kind of racist belief system that would lead to murder. And then also with Charlottesville, we also knew that at the core of that, the crux of that had to do with a Robert E. Lee statue coming down. And there were many people who opposed that. And so knowing that Franklin has had a statue in the center of its town since 1899 to a Confederate soldier to honor the Confederate dead, namely from the Battle of Franklin, we knew that Franklin could also be a place where a powder keg could erupt, where there could be tension, yet alone a fight along racial lines. And so we assembled on our square a couple of days after what happened in Charlottesville to pray. And there were many clergy there, people who weren't clergy. And these are clergy that many of them I've known since I started our church back in 1995. Black and white men that we walk together, we work together, and we naturally have relationships. So we didn't have to try to come together for a photo op, come together because of the urgency of the moment. We had already been together. So when we had assembled to pray, the media was there, they asked questions, and out of that came a group of men, myself, Hewitt Sawyers, Kevin Riggs, and Eric Jacobson, three pastors, one historian, and we decided to try to be proactive so that we would not have to later be reactive. We wanted to do something constructive so that it could keep our city from experiencing destruction. So that's when we prayed together, we strategized together, we looked at different options, and early on, just out of sheer emotion, there was a desire to take the statue down. But as we looked into that and as cooler heads began to prevail, we realized that that was not the best strategy for that time or for our city in the moment. And we decided that the best way to use our resources and to use our time was to try to tell more of the story of the Civil War, events before, during, and after the Civil War that were inclusive of the African American experience, because typically those things are left out in the textbooks, they're left out in the curriculum. And then when you add the lost cause narrative that came about from the Daughters of the Confederacy that basically, said that slavery was a peculiar institution, not an inhumane institution and a cruel institution, an evil institution. They pretty much put rose-colored glasses on slavery as well as the cause of the Civil War. And so we knew that that wasn't the truth. And so we wanted to tell stories that would shine the light on the African-American struggle, as well as the African-American conquest in Williamson County and in surrounding areas, but mainly Williamson County. So we wanted to tell stories. And we also wanted to put up a statue representing a soldier out of the United States Colored Troops soldiers who helped fight to end the Civil War and to bring about unity in America and the freedom of enslaved Africans. So that was our plan. And I guess it started back in 2017 when we really started getting into this. So here we are, 2020. A lot of progress has been made with that vision to tell the fuller story, to put historical markers up downtown for tourists as well as for our residents and citizens, but also, again, the statue for people to be able to see an African-American, or at that time, an enslaved American fighting for his and our freedom. Because since 1899, there's only been one representation. And so, Lord willing, 2021, there will be another representation that will join Chip on the square. And I guess this story has been so intriguing that cities and communities around the country, especially the South, have wanted to hear what we were able to accomplish. And because we had the full support of the mayor and the board of aldermen, again, unanimous voting on that, there were other cities that said, wow, what can we learn from Franklin? And so we ended up winning the Great American City not long ago in this competition that we were added, and the Fuller story was a big part of that. So it's an honor to be a part of it. We know everyone is not in agreement with it. There are people who feel like the statue should come down. And we say to those people, if that is your mission, then you go ahead and do that. But you're not going to hijack our mission or make us feel bad because our mission is not your mission. You're free to do your thing. And then there are people who, of course, they just leave it alone, don't touch anything down there, So anyway, and I'd love to talk about that with people, but I also know that there will never be 100% agreement on any kind of vision, but it's okay. We have the majority of people with this, and we have the people that count who are with us on this endeavor.
That's wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you to be on the task force around this?
Well, yes, Mayor Rogers Anderson reached out to me, but I also wrote in. I wrote in and said I would like to be on the task force. And they were still trying to figure out, I guess, the formality of how it was supposed to work. And so they decided to come up with a cross blend of people from the community, from the city, from the county, to be on this task force. They wanted it to be diverse, racially as well as experientially. And so I happened to be selected as representing the African-American religious community in Williamson County in Franklin. So that's how I got on. I believe it was a 9-member task force. And we had upwards of I believe, 6 weeks to follow through with what our task was, which was to present a case to the county commissioners concerning the upper left quadrant of the county seal. So that meant that this task force, for weeks, we had to get together and we had to meet and we had to talk. No one came in with a fixed position, even though we had opinions on it. That didn't enter into our meetings until like the final 2 sessions after we had gathered all the information from the various areas in the city, tourism, business, religion, and even just the social climate of it all. And so after we gathered the information, that's when we took a vote on where we stood with the quadrant. And it came down to, once again, a unanimous vote from our 9-member team to have the Confederate flag removed from the upper left quadrant. So we compiled a report. I forget how many pages it was, and it was handed into the 24 county commissioners to make a decision. And they voted on it. And I believe it was 18-6 or something like that, to accept our recommendation to have the seal, the flag removed from the seal. But our report, we were not tasked with the responsibility of deciding what would go into onto the seal in place of the flag. That was not our responsibility. We have ideas, but in order for our resolution or our suggestion to the commissioners to pass, we kept it on the point of what they asked for. And that is, we make a recommendation that the seal be removed from the upper left quadrant of the county seal.
I think there's a little bit of confusion statewide about the seals and the process for changing them. So seals aren't required in counties. Some people have them, some people don't. Here in Davidson County, our seal has a Native American on it, and it's so old that nobody even remembers who it was or why that person is on our seal. And it seems like a lot of people didn't know that Williamson County had a seal until recently, and then people kind of looked at it and said, oh no, this isn't reflective of us anymore. What are the next steps? So your task force was specifically on the upper left quadrant. I think some of the people on our call will have some questions about another quadrant on the seal also. So you were tasked with deciding basically to remove the Confederate flag from the upper left quadrant or not. What happens now?
Well, I believe the county commissioners, they have another meeting coming up and they're going to determine where it goes. In other words, that's above my pay grade. That's up to them now. And again, we have ideas on what could replace the flag, but to my knowledge, they haven't reached out to anyone on our task force, yet alone our commissioner. I mean, not our commissioner, our chairman. So again, we were put together for that task. And so what happens now is up to them. It's up to the commissioners.
Right. So for those who haven't seen it, Michal just downloaded a copy of the seal. So as you see, it has 4 quadrants. And as I understand it, it was designed to represent the different aspects that they wanted to emphasize in Williamson County when the seal was made, which was in the 1960s, I believe.
1968.
1968. And so that upper left quadrant with the cannon and the Confederate flag is the one that Dr. Williamson's task force was focused on. The rest of the quadrants weren't up for discussion in their group, right?
Right, correct.
Okay. So going forward, I'll ask your opinion since you said you have some. What should go there? Or should there just not be a seal, or what would your preference be?
Well, that was an option to recommend that the county do away with the seal altogether. But what we recommended was the removal of the Confederate flag, since that seemed to be the hot topic in the moment. But what I think could go there, a young lady from my church, an African American young lady, who had been watching what was going on. She's heavily involved in political science, and she's a student at Centennial High School. She designed that portion of the seal to have the Harpeth River on it, because the Harpeth River runs through much of Williamson County. And the Harpeth River takes us back to the indigenous peoples who were here before the colonists arrived. And the river is a place of beauty, natural resource. It's good for tourism. And again, it's something that speaks of who we are as Williamson County without putting up something that could be divisive. So that would be my recommendation. Some have talked about the Natchez Trace Bridge, but we know that that bridge is only in Williamson County, and then it's also unfortunately associated with suicide. And so for me, if I had to vote today, it would be to put the Harpeth River on that portion of the seal.
Right. Some of our community members reached out to us around this whole discussion to talk about the bottom left quadrant, which has a cross and a Bible in it. I know that wasn't the focus of your task force. What would your advice be to those who feel like that aspect also doesn't represent who Williamson County is today, exclusively Christian symbolism?
Yeah, I would say you can follow the path that brought success for the upper left quadrant. And that is one gentleman in particular. His name is Dustin Cochter. He has children from Uganda. And he remembers going into City Hall to work through matters of their adoption and had to cross over the Confederate flag. So that was the thing that stoked him to go and do something about that, because again, he's bringing in African children who will be African American children, but growing up in a climate and a culture that has a symbol of racial hatred. So he began a petition, and it garnered upwards of 11,000 or more signatures. He got in the newspaper. He went to individuals on the commission. He went to the mayor. So he took it upon himself to stir the pot. And so I would recommend that if anybody wants to change any part of the seal, remove the seal, then you have to be willing to stir the pot. You have to follow proper protocol. You have to make your voice heard and put it out there and see where it goes from there.
Right. Do you feel like there's a different acceptance of diversity in Franklin versus the rest of Williamson County? So you talked a lot about Franklin and meeting on the square and the people that you knew there. Do you feel like there's a difference in other parts of the county or not?
No, I pretty much feel that the South is the South. And there are some people who are content with diversity insofar as is representational of a couple of minorities blended in with the majority. That for them, that's diversity. But to me, that's window dressing. Diversity that does not lead to mutual equity and empowerment is not true diversity. Again, it's just window dressing. And I think some people are content to have a few minorities on a team or on a group, but they're not really looking at an equal distribution or redistribution of power, decision-making capabilities. So, and I know from a racial standpoint, there are not as many minorities in Franklin and Williamson County, and I'm sure Tennessee, as there are majority culture people. But still, if our sports teams can look diverse and be diverse and have people making decisions, why can't our places of government, our places of worship, our various institutions also have representation, legitimate representation of people across the spectrum? And so when I think about diversity, that's what I have in mind. People who are in seats of power making decisions, and not just people who are in the picture giving an illusion that we are together. We're not truly together until we get to share authority. So no, Williamson County and most counties in the South, areas in the South, are not at that place. And so, yeah, that's my opinion.
What steps do you think the county could take? We'll stay focused on the county for now to try to get to that level of diversity.
Well, I think it has to be a core value first of people. It can't be programmatic. It can't be something that you're doing to check the box. It has to be a core value. And usually those things will come out of relationships that you have. And so if you have authentic, ongoing relationships with Native people, with Hebrew people, with Islamic Muslim people, with Black people, with white people, with Latino people, if you have relationships, then it will be easier to find qualified people to fill spots when they come available. But if you only spend time with people who are like you, then you'll continue to fill spots with people who are like you. So it just can't be something we want to add so that we can look a certain way. Again, it's got to be a core value. But again, we can come together for so many things. Why can't we come together and do life? Our neighborhoods are segregated and our private schools are segregated, where we bank and do our commerce is segregated. And so therefore, we're going to keep getting what we get. But somebody has to say, I'm going against the grain. Somebody has to say, I'm tired of the status quo. I'm sick of this. And I want my life to reflect the richness that this county is capable of. So in my relationship with Eric Jacobson, for instance, who is the CEO of the Franklin Battle Trust, we got together over a crisis. That's how our friendship developed. But now our friendship is so much more than the crisis or even the fuller story. That's my guy. I love him. And in the midst of that, I've learned a whole lot about the Carnton Plantation. I've learned a lot, of course, about my people's participation as far as slaves on that property and that time of history. And then I share thoughts with him. I give him books. He gives me books. We check on her. So when I have a need, I can call him. When he has a need, he can call me. So it's going to spring out of these relationships that we have. But somebody's got to take a risk. Somebody's got to take a chance. And hopefully it can be some natural things that people you're around, people you see. If your kids are playing soccer and you see someone that you want to get to know, you reach out to them and you hope to build a friendship and a relationship over it. So it's slow steps, but it's incremental, specific steps that can lead to change. And even in my profession as a pastor, I talk to a whole lot of pastors who say they want their churches integrated. They say they want their churches to look like what heaven is going to be. And I say to them, well, if you want your churches to look like what heaven is going to be, you've got to integrate your leadership. You just can't expect minorities to come to your churches if they don't see minorities in places of power in the church. So now they want to change the subject when I bring that up because they want to hold on to the power. But you can't get something different if you don't do something differently. But we keep on getting the same thing because we keep doing the same thing. So, sorry, I'm a
Very
preacher.
true. No, that's okay. Powerful people often want to keep hold of their power. So yeah, I think you're right that community relations is the way that we build relationships to break through some of those barriers. But we do bump up against that as well, that when it comes down to it, you can be very open to a lot of ideas, but when it's about giving up your power, people often don't want to do it.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about schools. I know that's not your specific area of expertise, but a lot of times when people reach out to us about issues in Williamson County, they're school-based, about incidents of anti-Semitism. I know there have been a number of incidents of racism in the county recently, and it sounds like the school board is maybe making some changes to try to address race. What's your assessment about the school board and the superintendents and the superintendent and their efforts to address racism in the schools?
Well, I'm disappointed with how things are being handled, or should I say mishandled. I'm part of a group called the Franklin Justice and Equity Coalition. I'm an advisory board member with Walter Simmons and Brian Herbert, who lead that cause. And they go forth and they hold Dr. Snowden and others who are over the county school board, the special school district school board, accountable to do the things that they say they're going to do, or even to be a voice for parents who express their complaints and their frustrations. So they go forth and we go and talk with these people. And many times we find people who are very understanding, people who get it, people who are even ashamed of racist things that are done by board members, things that are done by students. There's a shame. But what we hardly see, though, is action, a follow up, a follow through. And in my opinion, these things will continue to happen if all people get is a slap on the wrist. There's no fear of consequence if someone says or does something that is anti-Semitic, or says or does something that is racist against the African American community or the Latino community. There are no consequences. And because of that, people just do and say what they want to do and say. So at some point, they're going to have to make an example out of someone. At some point, they're going to have to show tough love, because by doing that, you're not only teaching that person a lesson that they desperately need, but you're also saying to the community that has been offended, we love and value and honor you too. And we do that enough to protect you and respect who you are as people. And we're not going to let this go. But if we dig into the culture here and the history of the South, typically racism, anti-Semitism is not something that is confronted. It's usually something, again, slap on the wrist. It's usually something that's understood. But we're in a new day now, and our voices matter. There was a time when our voices didn't matter because we didn't matter, but we and our voices matter, and we're going to let you know. And if we have to protest, if we have to use media, social media, to let the world know, at least the local community know, that there are cowards in leadership, that there is unrighteousness going on in the schools, that people are being, you shouldn't have to go to school and be concerned about if you're going to be bullied. You shouldn't have to go to school and be concerned about if a teacher or an administrator or someone on the school board is going to say or do something that will put you in a harmful or even a dangerous light. That cannot be tolerated. And so therefore, they need to step up. They need to step up. And you can be distinguished and nice and still be assertive and do what is necessary. Again, there needs to be an example set so that other people will know, if I tattoo something on my body, the N-word, or if I, put a noose in the restroom, or if I put a SWAT sticker somewhere, that there will be consequences. But right now, there are no consequences.
Yeah, that's been true in our experience as well. So we often have reports of anti-Semitic incidents, but at the same time, at the end of the year, the school board issues reports saying they had 0 incidents of anti-Semitism in the Williamson County schools. So it's something that needs to be addressed. We have a couple of people on our call who live in Williamson County, and we're kind of instrumental in bringing you to us today. So I'm wondering, Celia and Sarah, if you have any questions for Dr. Williamson or comments you'd like to make.
Celia, you're muted, but I'll jump in and say thank you.
Okay, Sarah, if you want to go first, that's fine.
Sure.
Please go ahead, and then I'll say some things.
Okay. So I must admit, I'm one of the people who was very aware of the Williamson County seal from years ago, because I'm one of those people who enjoys attending school board meetings. And so I've been staring at that giant seal behind everybody that's up there on the platform. And honestly, the first thing that's always jumped out at me has been that Confederate flag. And it wasn't until Dustin's also a friend of mine, when he brought it to the media and he made this push for the upper left quadrant. After he had made that speech in Franklin, is when I approached him and said, hey, what about that lower left? We aren't talking about that yet. So I've got to admit, that's a little bit of a thorn in my side at the moment, because I feel like if we don't address it all now, how many more decades are going to have to pass before we look at how diverse Williamson County really is. And so I'm going to be one of those people who is willing to put my neck out there, as I already have a few times. But what I'm concerned about is, there is a lot of allies in the community. I know that there is a discrimination in WCS at Centennial, an assembly on Saturday at 4 o'clock that I'll be attending. And it's It's difficult to get people together now in this COVID age, but how does the Jewish community enlist other people to be our allies? If you can speak to that, because I think that, I attend for Williamson County, when they created the Cultural Competency Council, I attended those meetings and I showed up, and you take one look at me and everybody thinks, oh, I'm, maybe a white woman in the room trying to cause trouble, not assuming that I'm an ally or that I'm there as a minority myself. And so I think that there's, a long history of how we've worked, the Jewish community and the Black community have worked together to make progress here. But I'm curious to get your take on that as well.
Well, I think it's similar to what I said earlier. It's the building friendships. And so since you said, Dustin Cochter and I know Dustin Cochter, now we know each other. And so through this first meeting with the Jewish Federation, I've made new friends. And so there may be things that you may think, Pastor Chris or Chris Williamson might be able to help with this. And it might have my name on it, and you may invite me to the table and I'll come. Or I may know someone else who can also maybe come if I can't make it. So it's just relationships. And we know that there's a way that we can be unified without being in uniformity, that we can be one without being the same. So there may be issues that really resonate with your heart and with your community that may not necessarily resonate with mine because it's not my experience. But that doesn't mean I can't try to understand it. And even when we talk about the cross, obviously as Christians and Jewish people, we see the cross differently. So there may be some things I may be able to help on. There may be some things it might not be wise for me to participate in. But if I look at humanity and say, wow, what can we do? Because if our Jewish neighbors feel this way, I'm sure our Islamic neighbors feel this way. There are Mormons in the city. So therefore, do we need to have an emblem that only represents one group of people? Maybe we need to have an all-inclusive mosaic of religious symbols, or maybe we need to do away with the seal, or maybe we need to do something different in that quadrant. But I think it starts with dialogue, and it starts with us taking up one another's cause, because we care. We generally care for one another, even though we're different. We care for one another, and we're going to be humane about it. I'll come to a fight with you guys.
I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks.
Celia, did you have?
Absolutely. I have several things to say. One, since we talked about the seal first, I'll comment about that a little bit. And Sarah drew my attention to that. We do live in Williamson County. I had not realized it was there, but once I saw it, it just hit me in the face. The symbol of the Confederacy, the racist symbol of white supremacy and everything just didn't sit right. And I did reach out to our commissioners, and both of them were very helpful. And what I understand, the status right now is that the commissioners did vote to get rid of the Confederate flag, and they weren't able to deal with the other quadrant, because I've spoken to them in favor of getting rid of both the Confederate flag and the cross with the Bible. They so their hands were tied with that. But as I understand it, I think that the Tennessee Historic Commission has control at this point, unless they've already met. I don't know if they have. And then
the meeting is sometime this month. Yeah,
okay,
yes, you're right.
And then the commissioners could decide. And my commissioners said, both of them, Beth Lathers and Tommy Little, so they both would be fine with either, whatever people decide. They could understand the argument. They certainly were wanting the upper left quadrant to be changed, and they seemed also to understand on the lower left quadrant. So as far as I understand, that's where that issue is. But it's and I can come back to that also. But I do want to talk about the Fuller story for a minute, because living in Williamson County, we used to go down to the square, and we would see the Confederate soldier and take our kids, and I always just cringed. And I thought, oh, what is this symbol doing here? And I was like, I don't want to even be close to it. I want to be far away from it. Growing up Jewish in Birmingham, Alabama, that's a whole other story I can tell you about. I was very sensitive to issues related to race and related to religion and discrimination from a very early age. But then, Charlottesville happened, and I actually went to the University of Virginia as an undergraduate. You said you're from Virginia, or your wife is from
I'm
Virginia?
from Baltimore. My wife is from
Baltimore
Virginia.
originally, but you went to school in Virginia.
I went to school in Virginia.
But anyway, I would think every American that resonated with. I mean, what you saw in Charlottesville and the things before that. But when I learned of the Fuller story, I thought, oh my gosh, that is amazing. I guess I heard about it. I started reading about it probably in early 2019. I don't know when it was first publicized, but I was like, I want to find out more about that. And I kept looking, cutting out clippings. And I talked to Rick Warwick over at the Historical Society, and I was trying to find out what's going on with this thing. And when our older daughter got engaged, and she likes the architecture in downtown Franklin. And she found a venue in downtown Franklin that she really liked. And, I said, well, I've heard about the Fuller story, so let me find out more about it. And I didn't, like I said, talk to Rick. And we looked at one of the really nice couple of the places. I said, do you know about the Fuller story, when it's going to happen, when it's going, I guess when the markers will be placed and everything. And both the venue we went to knew about it, and the hotel there, the new hotel, Harpeth Hotel, they knew about it. In fact, I think she, the woman we've been in touch with, had attended the ceremony when the markers were placed. And we kind of said, we wouldn't feel comfortable having a wedding in downtown Franklin with that Confederate soldier statue there. And so as it turned out, well, our daughter was supposed to have gotten married on October the 18th, but because of COVID, that didn't happen. It's put off for next year. But in fact, I believe the date when the markers were placed was it October the 17th, 2019 or
Yes,
something like that?
October 17th, yes.
Right. And our daughter was supposed to get married on October the 18th, 2020. So I thought, wow, it's just sort of the way that kind of flowed. But it just, when you look at where our country is right now, and I know you deal a lot with training about diversity and unity, and we need you, and we need so many others, because if you look at what's happening in our country right now, as you've alluded to, in some ways we couldn't be more divided. There are people who want to start another civil war. Mm-hmm. And there are those who woke up, whether it's George Floyd or before, and suddenly you have people from all walks of life, all races, all backgrounds, recognizing that we need to fight for racial justice. And the thought occurred to me when I was thinking about what you were going to talk about. And I was thinking, what are the solutions here? And I know you deal in solutions to a lot of things. Here we're talking about Confederate symbols. In one case, your group decided to leave the Confederate symbol, but to educate people, which people need to be so much educated to kind of address the wounds and then move forward. And then we have on the seal, we want that taken out because it's really different. I think as I understand it, the Confederate monument was about the number of people who died in the Battle of Franklin, like 10,000 or something, to commemorate that. So for some people whose families have that background, maybe that meant something to them. So, I go back and forth. Should that Confederate, should Chip be there or should Chip not be there? But it's just all the thing that I think is so amazing is the community and the people in the government came together to make all this happen. Our country, with this election going on, I make no secret about my support Biden and Harris. And I know you went to Barack Obama's inauguration, I think I read.
I did. I went to both. I went to when he was sworn in for the first time, and I went to the balls and everything the second term. Yes. Yep.
But we need Joe and Kamala to help unite this country, and we need people like you and all of us, because it really, I think you had this unite the right side, but I'd say unite people of conscience on the other side. And whatever happens in this election, hopefully people make the right choice. People be hurting. I read something that was this morning on the internet, that there was a teenager who wanted to I hardly don't even want to say this. He had guns in his car and he wanted to kill Joe Biden. He was near his home. And I'm like, oh my God, there's such violence. We had people who wanted to kidnap the governor but the governors both of Michigan and Virginia.
Mhm.
There's such hatred. There's
Yes.
so these groups, QAnon and all these hated, all the Charlottesville. I could talk quite a lot about Charlottesville too. And like you said, the Mother Emanuel Church before, and all the things connected to Charlottesville. I also mentioned to you, I think I sent it, and I'm talking a lot. I can stop in just a minute and want to hear your take on it, please. I sent you an email at one point, Dr. Williamson, I don't know if you saw, about Integrity First for America. It's a group that's suing the neo-Nazis and the people in Charlottesville, and they have a lot of faith leaders involved in that and others, but they've made a lot of progress in that. But I think we just all need to work together to bring us together. As Biden and others say, we need to be a United States of America. We're not red states and blue states.
Right.
We're humans. We're all Americans. And so I don't know if I talk too much or whatever, but this is just this is a passion of mine.
That's right.
It's been from the time I was a small child with the separate but equal bathrooms in Birmingham, Alabama, and witnessing because my mother got lost. We ended up in the middle of one of the civil rights protests, and people being carted away in a paddy wagon, and they were singing. And I asked my mother what was going on, and she said, well, they're going to jail. And I said, why are they singing? And she said, because they're fighting for their cause. Where she could not explain she could not explain why there were separate fountains and bathrooms. She never could tell me what that was. I was born in 1954, outing my age here. So I grew up at a time with a lot going on. Our synagogue was targeted actually by the same people who, and I didn't know when I was 4 years old, who bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church. They attempted to bomb our synagogue. So we had Pinkerton guards when I went to nursery school and kindergarten, and I thought it was normal to have Pinkerton guards, but it's just at a synagogue. But it's just that there were people who tried to the same people, I think, associated later. The 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham was bombed by. So this has been a part for me.
Right.
This whole,
Celia,
yes.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to make sure we give Dr. Williamson a chance to respond to the things that you said. You've kind of gotten a lot with him. So let me give him a chance to
I was just going to say, so sorry if I spoke too long.
Oh, no. Well, I appreciate Celia's passion. And I'm a very outspoken, forthright person. So I'll just say this. The KKK not only hates Black people, but they hate Jewish people. And when we think about America and what we see today, the division that's going on, you talk about solutions and how we can get better and come together. Well, we're not going to get better until we can really admit that we're sick. And with this president that we've had, he has, through his rudeness, his arrogance, his evil, and yes, his racism, he has emboldened underground racists to come up from underground. So what was once just overt is now once again covert. And the spirit of white supremacy is what this country was founded on. And it has never been dealt with. It has never been repented of. And until that happens, until white people stop being defensive when we talk about history, which is one of the reasons we wanted to put the statue up. One of the reasons we wanted to put the markers up was because we wanted to deal with the myth of white supremacy and the myth of white innocence and the whole antebellum South and the whole thing about, it's heritage, not hate. No, we want to tell the stories that right there in the center of Franklin, attached to the first courthouse, was a market house. And in that market house, where Chip stands today, before Chip stood there, there was the first courthouse and a market house where Africans were bought and sold there. That's a part of the story that needs to be told so that it wipes that veneer of innocence and purity off of the country and off of our county to say there were some wrong things done. But to complicate the matter, you had many Christians who used the Bible, the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, to say that God ordained the enslavement of Africans. And so they caused God to join in on their folly for hundreds of years to justify enslavement and the mistreatment of Native people, Latino people, Jewish people. So the spirit of white supremacy is still very strong. And it takes courage to confront it, because when you confront it, many times they will bomb your church. They will shoot you as you stand on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. They will cast you out of certain meetings and not include you in decision-making opportunities in the town. So we got to deal with white supremacy. And I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to speak it in love. I'm going to put the truth up, the history, which is why, again, people need to ride through downtown, see that statue, see those markers, see the statue of a United States colored troop soldier, and come to their own conclusions. And I believe in the future, there will be another group of people who, now having been more educated, more enlightened, will say, you know what? We can't erase our history, but we should take that thing down. And we can honor the Confederate dead, because all of them were not racist. We can still honor them, but let's take that thing down, because we are better than that as a community. And it may lead to different changes also on the seal when we talk about what's best for our community. So just because something was put up back in the day, that doesn't mean it has to stay in our day. Again, we can document it. It's not going to go away as far as history is concerned. But when you leave those things in place, seals, statues, curriculum, that's just that holding on to power. And one of the hardest things for some white people, let me say some, so I don't get a bombardment of emails, and it's to let go of power. It's to equally distribute power, to be fair and equitable in the process. So we have to keep calling it out, and I have no problem doing that, because my ancestors, they paid too high a price for me to sit and do nothing. I am motivated. I just like Celia has that passion. I have that passion too, because as Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And if you mistreat one group of people, it's not long before you mistreat another group of people. But we've got to be honest about American history, white supremacy, manifest destiny, tell the truth about Christopher Columbus. We've got to deal with the truth, tell the truth about Donald Trump, that you can't say those kinds of things that he says and yet claim that he's not racist. That when he says things, he's pouring gasoline on the racists. So he can say he's not a racist, but the racists in our country sure love him and they sure support him. And we're going to find out something after the results of this election. If Joe Biden wins, and he has already said he is not, Trump is not going to concede peacefully the way every other president has done, and that there are people who are wanting to get into a civil war, I'm going to look to my white Christian brothers in particular to stand up and speak up. But the only problem is they have drank the Kool-Aid of Donald Trump, and they've been silenced by his stupidity for the past 3 years, and they're in bed with him. And so it's just so sad that we don't even have to divide. We shouldn't divide over things like that. But there are people in the dark corners of the world waiting for opportunities to come out and hurt Jewish people, hurt Black people, hurt Latino people, and the onus of this lies on white people to speak to their community and help fix this, to not be silent, to not be complicit, but come on, say something and do something. Just like back with the school board. If you don't say and do something, you're complicit with it. It means you're in agreement with it. No, come on. We got to stand up for each other. So even if we have different religions, different skin color, we are humans. And I'm sick of it. I really am. Oh boy, you done got me started now. And I thank God for the white people in my church who get it, who the lights have come on, who are willing to risk their comfort, who are willing to risk their opportunities to stand on the side of truth. So back in the 60s, as Celia was talking about, as she and her mom walked into a rally at a protest in Birmingham for the civil rights movement, we're on a human rights battle now. And I tell you what, my grandchildren will not have to wonder if their grandfather was on the right side of history. You know, no, I'm on the right side, and I'm willing to die for it. I'm willing to die for truth, and I hope it doesn't have to come to that. But I have to alert people in my church who are security in my church, because I know I'm a target in our community because of the things I say that confront white supremacy. So I know I'm a target, but I'm protected. They don't want to roll up on me.
That's good. Just to follow up on that a little bit and link back to something you said earlier, one of the questions in the chat is about using the personal relationships that you've talked about to try to make change in Williamson County. So you've had experience, successful experience, having personal interactions with people that you at least initially disagree with, and working through that and still being able to affect change. Do you think that method can work effectively to address the issues that we've been talking about in Williamson County, or do you think something else needs to happen as well?
No, it can work, because as you guys talked about Charlottesville and the protesters who were upset that there was a group of people wanting to remove Robert E. Lee's statue, but they were also chanting blood and soil, which is an anti-Semitic statement. So again, this spirit, this evil spirit. So we're going to stand together to confront that. So yeah, absolutely. Because again, there are some wars and battles worth fighting for. And yes, we can come together. There's an old saying that says, I don't care about the color or the religion of the person in the foxhole with me, as long as they're shooting in the same direction at the same enemy. So let's get in the foxhole together and let's shoot at the same enemy. And we know it's not by and large people, but it's a philosophy and a belief system that needs to come down, because it's ignorance. It's ignorance. So we have to educate people so they can become aware, and then the awareness hopefully will lead to a change of action or a change of lifestyle. Education, awareness, and action.
Are you concerned about post-election violence in Williamson County?
I am. I'm not afraid, but I'm concerned, because there are enough people. I think Joe Biden said last night that the president sends out these bird calls. I forget the exact terminology, but he's using a megaphone, a bullhorn when he's doing it. That he's
dog
signaling
whistle.
his dog whistle, but he's signaling his base. The Proud Boys. He's signaling his base, and there are people who will talk about ideas to kidnap governors who shut down cities. There are people who are against Democrats because the president is against Democrats. There are people who will not wear a mask because the president doesn't believe in wearing masks. So yes, he is sending that whistle out, that dog whistle. And there are people, and I just hope and pray that it will be squashed, that nothing will happen if Joe Biden wins. Nothing negative will happen. But again, the president has the power to do something about it, but I don't count on him. He's spoken and said many, many evil things about a number of people groups. So we just got to hope that the people will do the right thing, and that group would be small in number. But I hope no one gets hurt if there is a transference of power.
Right. So there was a question about demographics in Williamson County and how they're changing. And Adam, thank you for posting. I'm assuming that's from the last census. So it's over 90% white, with small sections of non-white people. And Williamson County is estimated to be the county in Tennessee with the highest percentage of Asian residents, which I did not know. But back to your experience, given the issues that concern you, what keeps you in Williamson County?
I tried to move. I really did. I tried to leave. Elohim keeps me in Williamson County. And when I look back on it, I see the wisdom in it, because had I moved, our church started in Franklin, and it was here for 17 years before moving into Brentwood, Nashville, but I still live here. But I wanted to move, closer to our church, closer to Nashville. But my daughter, who's at Franklin High School, she put in a passionate plea saying, "Dad, I don't want to go to a new school." And we put our house on the market, but it did not sell. It showed well, but we didn't get one offer. And so I knew that God was telling me, stay where you are. Because had I moved, I wouldn't have been able to be involved with the fuller story. I wouldn't have been able to be involved with the SEAL and the task force. So I'm thankful to be here. So what keeps me here? I love it. It's a beautiful place. It's home. When I travel any place around the world, I look forward to coming back to be in a airport and riding up 65 to come to Williamson County. And my father-in-law says, Chris, you know, it's no accident that you're in Williamson County and your last name is Williamson. You know, you're supposed to be there. So I'm glad we're making some headway in some ways and in some places. But yeah, I love it here. I love it here.
Great. Any other questions? People can unmute themselves and ask if somebody who hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet wants to.
Chris, Adam Bronson, I actually work for the Federation. About a year ago, we, along with, we sponsored a 2-day workshop on de-escalation of violence, a national program. And we brought together different faith communities, schools as well. Metro Nashville Public Schools brought something like 20 teachers. It's really quite impressive. We tried to reach out countless times to Williamson County, to the superintendent, not so much for him to attend, but for him to send someone on behalf of the school to this program that also included the Office of Emergency Management and Metro Nashville Police. What I found was that they were incredibly disinterested. And that's maybe the best word I can use. I think an underestimate of the word I would use for them. I don't know whether it was because we as a Jewish organization were asking, or they simply just didn't care about the issue whatsoever. But I found it very telling that, Nashville sent an overabundance of people and some senior management educators. And Williamson, which is, I guess the second largest county, certainly within our kind of catchment, I couldn't get a hold of the superintendent for love or money. Email, phone calls, messages. It was very disheartening. And I just wonder, from your experience, is that just their MO? Is that the superintendent's MO in terms of just not wanting to engage on something that's not, a Williamson County thing, or that is about, bringing people together?
I don't have that experience with him. I haven't had to do the things that you've done to get his attention or garner his attention. So I'm sorry that has happened to you, but that doesn't surprise me. Again, who is the individual? Because I don't know.
It was, I think it's Eric Golden.
Okay.
Well, Jason Golden's the current superintendent. A couple years ago, it was Mike Looney.
Yeah,
Jason Golden was the attorney at the time.
It's Jason Golden who we tried to get a hold of.
Okay.
Reach out to me, and I can help there next time.
Well, it's a one-time program, but it was really important over 2 days of all the people that came together to, work to see how we can make a better community. And I even reached out to some of the board members to try to, impress how important this was. And he just seemed to, not care. And kind of like the funny thing was, his assistant was like, "Well, have you left messages?" And I said, "Yes, countless." It would have been just respectful of him to come back to me. And I didn't know whether that was just, I
think there are people who do not believe any kind of brutality and violence can happen in Franklin. So when we talked about Franklin could be like Charlottesville, there were people offended by that because we had to go door to door and talk to some people in power in the city. And when we talked about that, there were people who felt like, oh, no, not Franklin. There's no way Franklin can be like Charlottesville. So I think there are people who are in denial because maybe they think if they talk about this problem, then maybe it will become a problem. So therefore they deny it, stay away from it. But I think there's a mindset here that says we don't need to talk about that because we're a good, quaint town until something happens, and then they'll say, well, that was just an individual who did that, but again, we got to be proactive and deal with the problems. And then we got to make examples of the people who commit these problems. But yeah, I'm sorry about that. But maybe, in the future, the Franklin Justice and Equity Coalition can do a night on social media talking about this, and we can bring in different people to talk about it, because once that word gets out, there are people who don't want, again, they want to keep this image of being good, and maybe it will be a motivation to say, oh, we got to fix that, and let me return a phone call to this man, let me return an email to this man, let me send someone from my team to come to this 2-day workshop that will be helpful. But that's how we have to do today. We have to be, wise with how we deal with these folks. I'm sorry, man, that hurts, man. I can see it still hurts, bro. But I'm glad you kept going, though. I'm glad you kept going.
Well, the people who came, I think, very much got a lot out of it. So their gain, and unfortunate for, for Jason, but unfortunate for, the school district at the end of the day, and their students. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Adam, for the question, and thank you, Dr. Williamson, for that answer. And I think also it goes back again to relationships. And so I am very grateful that you were willing to spend your time with us today to begin building more relationships between us and into Williamson County. It's an extension of the relationships we have, and the more of those relationships we have, the stronger they are, the better for all of us. And I think you're right. I think sadly, my guess, from my contacts in Charlottesville didn't think that would happen in Charlottesville, and Pittsburgh didn't think it would happen in Pittsburgh. South Carolina, Charleston didn't think it would happen in Charleston. Sadly, none of us believe it can happen in our backyards, and sadly, we're seeing it can. And so this is why this work is so important for us, to be in relationship, to know each other, as you said, prior to it, that we know each other and have strong bonds before anything, God forbid, is to occur, and that we can strengthen ourselves and our communities together. So thank you again for
Could I add something to that, Deb?
Sure.
Chris, listening to you, what comes to mind is, where have you been all my life? I almost want to move to Williamson to work with you, but not enough to move there. But I'm so encouraged by your voice. I'm so encouraged by your courage. And I hope we can work together. I think we need you in broader Nashville, not just in Williamson County as a voice. And I hope we can engage with you in a continued basis.
Absolutely.
But thank you for who you are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for joining us today. I liked your idea of being proactive so that we don't later have to be reactive. That's something that Deborah and I work a lot on. Deborah, can you tell us who our speaker is next week?
I'll give a quick announcement. Before next Friday, though, we have a program Monday night with Suzanne Nozzle and her book, Dare to Speak, a frank conversation about the freedom of speech, the importance of freedom of speech in our society and to who we are as Americans, but also the concerns that freedom is raising vis-a-vis social media. So that will be Monday evening. And then next Friday and the Friday after, we have what we've sort of thought of as our bookends of the election. So we have a conversation with Rabbi Joshua Kulik from West End Synagogue next Friday to provide sort of calm for us moving into the election. And then we will be joined by Ron Hetty the Friday after the election to learn about Braver Angels initiative called With Malice Towards None. It's a program that Braver Angels is initiating with the hopes of trying to bring people back together after this very divisive election season.
And don't forget, we have Noah on Sunday.
Oh, thank you, Avi. Thank you.
Yes. And if you haven't yet signed up to represent your personal synagogue, we would love to have you sign on with us and represent the CRC, who's also a member of Noah. And then last announcement, early voting ends next Wednesday. So if you haven't voted yet, please go and do so. Thank you again, Dr. Williamson, for joining us.
Can
And
I,
thank
can
you
I say
all.
one last thing? Can I say one last thing?
Please,
Yes.
please.
You reminded me of something. As I mentioned, our journey is very similar in terms of much of the persecution that we faced here in this country as Jewish and African American people. But right now, I'm on a new coalition with Rabbi Laurie Rice from Congregation Micah, and we are looking at putting up markers to commemorate African Americans who were lynched in Franklin, Williamson County. But in the midst of our research, we discovered that one of the first people to be lynched in Franklin was a Jewish man.
Wow.
I want to say somewhere along West Main Street. So as we call attention to the African American horror story, we're also looking at how can we incorporate this history as well of a Hebrew man, a Jewish man, also succumbing to a similar fate. So it's great to, again, have a relationship with Rabbi Laurie and her husband. I've been to their congregation. It's going to take those kind of partnerships, working together to do what is right, to tell the truth about history, even the things that don't make us look that good. But again, those things are necessary to talk about in order to move forward together. So I'm excited about that. And she's got a lot of fire in
Wonderful.
her. I love her. She's
does.
something else, boy.
She's a great community. She's a great community
Hey,
partner.
Chris, there's a lot of people think Abraham Lincoln was Jewish because who else names their kid Zaid but a Jew?
Oh boy, I haven't heard.
And on that note, thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you again, Dr. Williamson. We look forward to partnering with you again in the future. Have a wonderful day and Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.